Reader's Report. Date: October 11th, 1929. Author: Churchward, Colonel James. Title: The Lost Continent of Mu, Motherland of Men. This book, issued by the publisher Rudge in a limited and most attractively printed edition, presents the author's theories in regard to the history of man's life and work on the earth. These conclusions of the author are, however, presented to his readers not as theories or hypotheses, but as absolutely well-established facts. The author's work would have a better chance of respectful acceptance if he had been more modest in his record and had submitted his conclusions in the shape of suggestions or hypotheses, rather than as the final word upon all the questions, some of them controversial during the past centuries, connected with the history of mankind. The author makes no reference to his own scientific training or educational experience. It is possible, of course, that he has had a thorough scientific course, but there is no statement to such effect. The title page of the Rudge edition contains no reference to any university. The author presents conclusions which are entirely out of accord with those arrived at, during the past quarter century or more, by anthropologists of authority. He makes references to but very few of these scientists. It seems probable that his book, if submitted by the literary committees of the leading journals to scientists of established authority, would be dismissed by them as the work of a crank. The author has read widely and has traveled in many regions. He has shown great ingenuity in piecing together bits of evidence from Asia, Egypt, Mexico, Yucatan, the western regions of the American continent, and so forth. Archaeological details which support, or appear to support, his theory of the existence many thousand of years ago of a great civilized community. He places the seat of this community in the northern part of what is now the Pacific Ocean. He contends that this country was inhabited by a well-civilized race, which is referred to in certain records, mainly Asiatic, under the name of Mu, and was overwhelmed at a date which he undertakes to fix with some precision many thousands of years back. The remnants of this continent are to be found in the Pacific Ocean, in the form of such groups of islands as the Easter Islands and so forth. He contends, as if the conclusion is one that could be made with precision, that a group of civilized men existed and produced works of art, ruins of which remain, and works of literature, the remnants of which have disappeared nearly 50,000 years ago. No other anthropologist undertakes to fix, with precision, the date when civilization took shape in the form of art or architecture or records. Their calculations vary from 25 to 40,000 years. The reports of other archaeologists present the conclusion that man's evolution was slow. The skulls and the bones and implements that have been found with dates calculated at from 10,000 to 30,000 years are those of peoples in an early stage of development. The author makes statements as facts which are not in accord with accepted history. He speaks, for instance, of the biblical account written by Moses. The history of the Hebrew Scriptures makes clear that the accounts ascribed by some of the earlier writers to have been written by Moses were in most cases written centuries after the life of the more or less legendary person called Moses must have terminated. These scholars have also made clear that the books in question, those of the Hexateuch for instance, were the work not of one writer but of several. The author takes the ground that the biblical accounts written, as he says, by Moses were based upon the Egyptian legend of the creation. The scholars who have analyzed these books make clear that the Hebrew presentation of the legends of creation and so forth are based not upon Egyptian sources, but upon the legends and traditions of Lower Mesopotamia, the land of Ur. The author tells us, see page 25, that at the time of our narrative, 64 million people were made up of 10 tribes, or peoples, each one distinct from the other, but all under one government. He is here mixing up a record from the Chronicles of Israel with the general evolution of humanity. there is apparently no warrant for his precise calculation that the population of Mu at this time, or at any time, comprised 64 million people. He tells us that these people were living in luxurious homes. Bright, smooth roads ran in all directions. It would be difficult to find warrant for any such specific statement. He tells us that there was no savagery on the face of the earth, nor had there ever been. This statement is in contradiction to the conclusions presented by all the anthropologists who have studied from the bones and records the history of humanity. On page 107, he refers to certain races as not Aryans at all. He believes that these belong to a totally different line of colonization. According to my understanding, ethnologists have given up the use of the term Aryan as unscientific. It does not properly describe either a race or a language, and certainly cannot be definitely applied to colonization. He tells us that the capital city of a race or empire that he calls the Uyghurs was in the Gobi Desert. This hypothesis is somewhat in line with the report sent by Andrews from Mongolia. He tells us that Atlantis was submerged 11,500 years ago, and that it had been governed by kings 25,000 years ago. He adds that the first king of Mayax began his reign 34,000 years ago. He says that Mu was at the height of her magnificence 50,000 years ago. It would be difficult to find warrant for any such precise conclusions, while the very existence of Atlantis remains still a matter of controversy. He tells us that the civilization of the known world, instead of coming from Egypt as had been contended, or as some anthropologists assert, from the mouth of the Euphrates, came from America and India. The soil of Egypt was first trod by colonists from America. He tells us in the final chapter that great scientists who have been advocates of the theory of evolution have very largely become atheists. A true evolutionist cannot be anything but an atheist. Henry Fairfield Osborn, a Presbyterian in good standing, who classes himself as a true evolutionist, might have something to say about this statement. It is my impression that if the book secured attention from any of the scientific journals, it would be dismissed as the work of a crank. The scientific reviewer would say, "The author has done a good deal of reading, but he does not know enough about the literature of the subject, and he has been unduly contemptuous in regard to the conclusions of the conscientious students who have, during a century or more, been working over the data and the discoveries gradually coming to light concerning the history of man." I am afraid that the book would be laughed at rather than discussed. I should therefore not recommend its being taken up as a publishing investment. It might be published as a curiosity if the author were ready to find the money required.